The morning Josephine Fletcher arrived in Abilene, Kansas with nothing but a carpetbag and $3 sewn into her petticoat. She had already decided she would rather starve than ask anyone for help. It was late August 1878, and the dust hung thick in the air as cattle drives pushed through town toward the railhead, filling the streets with noise and chaos. She stood outside the mercantile, reading a notice for a seamstress position, when her stomach cramped so violently she had to grip the wooden post to stay upright. She had not eaten in 2 days, but her pride was all she had left after burying her father in Missouri and losing their farm to his debts. The position had already been filled, the shopkeeper told her with barely a glance. Josephine thanked him quietly and walked back into the bright sunlight, unsure where to turn next. She was 22 years old, alone, and quickly running out of options in a town that had no use for another penniless woman. She passed the hotels she could not afford, the saloons she would not enter, and found herself near the edge of town where a large cattle outfit had made camp. Cowboys moved between chuck wagons and remuda corrals, preparing for another long day. The smell of coffee and bacon made her dizzy with hunger. She approached carefully, spotting an older woman stirring a massive pot over an open fire. "Excuse me, ma'am," Josephine said, her voice steady despite her desperation. "I am looking for work, any kind of work. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend to animals. I do not require much in wages." The woman looked her over with shrewd eyes, taking in the clean but worn dress, the careful posture, the hunger barely hidden beneath good manners. "You run away from something or someone?" "No, ma'am. My father passed 3 weeks ago. There was nothing left to stay for." The woman wiped her hands on her apron. "I am Cookie's wife, Mabel. We handle meals for the Triple Bar Ranch crew when they are in town. Always need extra hands during cattle season. Pay is not much, but you will get meals and a place to sleep. Can you start now?" Josephine nearly wept with relief. "Yes, ma'am, thank you." That was how she found herself an hour later, slicing vegetables and learning the rhythm of feeding 30 hungry cowboys. Mabel worked her hard but fairly, showing her where everything was kept and how much food it took to satisfy men who spent 14 hours a day in the saddle. Josephine absorbed every instruction, determined to prove her worth. When the dinner bell rang at 6 o'clock, the cowboys came in waves, dusty and exhausted, piling their plates high with beef, beans, biscuits, and potatoes. She noticed him on the second day. He was tall and lean, probably around 25, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water after rain. He wore his hat low and spoke quietly when he thanked Mabel for the food. Unlike some of the other cowboys who joked loudly and shoved each other, this one moved with careful economy, as though he had learned not to take up too much space in the world. His name was James Brennan, Mabel told her. Good worker, kept to himself mostly, been with the Triple Bar for 3 years. Josephine tried not to pay attention to any of them. She was there to work, to earn enough money to figure out her next step. But James was hard to ignore, not because he demanded attention, but because of the way he noticed things. When one of the younger cowboys accidentally knocked over a water bucket, James was there to help refill it before anyone could complain. When an older ranch hand struggled with his saddle, James quietly assisted without making the man feel foolish. He had a quality of quiet competence that reminded Josephine of her father before illness had weakened him. She served the meals but never ate with the cowboys. Mabel had shown her the routine. Feed the crew first, then the women could eat whatever remained. There was usually plenty, but Josephine had learned hunger's lessons well during those final months on the failing farm. She took modest portions, never seconds, always making sure there was enough for tomorrow. Old habits of scarcity died hard, James noticed on the 4th day. She was cleaning up after the dinner rush, scraping plates and hauling water when he approached the wagon with his empty dish. Most of the men just dropped theirs in the wash bin, but James always handed his over carefully. "Thank you for the meal," he said, like he did every evening. "You are welcome," Josephine replied, taking the plate. He hesitated, shifting his weight. "I have not seen you eat." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I eat later with Mabel. Do you?" His voice was not accusatory, just quietly curious. "Because I have watched for 4 days now and I have not seen you take more than a few bites, and you never go back for seconds, even when there is plenty." Josephine stiffened. "I eat enough, Mr. Brennan. Thank you for your concern." She turned away, dismissing him, but his words stayed with her. That evening when the Cowboys had finished and Mabel sat down with her own heaping plate, Josephine took her usual small portion. Mabel, bless her, never commented on anyone's appetite. She was too busy feeding herself after hours of labor. The next morning at breakfast, something changed. When the Cowboys lined up with their plates, James did not join the front of the line like usual. Instead, he hung back, and when Josephine was ladling out eggs and salt pork, he stepped up to her station. But instead of holding out his own plate, he picked up a clean one from the stack. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Serving your plate," he said simply. He held it toward her, and she automatically spooned eggs onto it. He moved down the line to where Mabel was handling the meat and biscuits, and Josephine watched in confusion as he had them load up the plate. Then he came back and set it firmly on the small preparation table beside her. "Eat that before it gets cold. I will get mine after." "Mr. Brennan, that is not necessary, maybe not, but I am doing it anyway." He met her eyes, and she saw no pity there, just a straightforward determination. "You work hard, you should eat." Then he stepped back into line, waiting his turn while Josephine stared at the full plate beside her. The eggs were perfectly cooked, the biscuit still steaming, the salt pork crispy at the edges. Her stomach twisted with hunger and something else, something that felt dangerously like tears. No one had done something like this for her in so long. Not since her mother had died when Josephine was 15, not since her father had been well. Mabel caught her eye and nodded approvingly. "That one has a good heart. Now eat before he starts a revolution among the others." Josephine ate. And James, watching from where he finally received his own portion, allowed himself a small smile. It became their routine. Every meal, James made sure Josephine had a full plate before he served his own. At first, some of the other Cowboys teased him about it, but James ignored them with the same patient indifference he applied to most things. After a few days, they lost interest and moved on to other entertainment. But Josephine never stopped being aware of him, of the quiet kindness that asked nothing in return. She tried to thank him properly one evening when the work had slowed. "Mr. Brennan, I want you to know that I appreciate what you have been doing. You do not have to continue." "I am managing fine now. Are you saying you want me to stop?" he asked. "No, I do not want you to feel obligated." "I do not feel obligated," James said. "I do it because I want to, because you should not have to go hungry when there is food enough. Why do you care?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. James was quiet for a moment, looking out at the cattle penned nearby. "My mother died when I was 12. My father drank himself to death 2 years later. I spent 3 years working for a ranch that barely fed me, working sunrise to sunset for almost nothing. I know what it is like to be alone and hungry and too proud to ask for help. So when I see someone in that position and I can do something about it, I do." Josephine felt something crack open inside her chest. "I am sorry that happened to you. It was a long time ago. I am doing fine now." He looked back at her. "And you will be too. You are a hard worker. That counts for a lot out here." "Thank you," she whispered. James tipped his hat. "Get some rest, Miss Fletcher. Tomorrow will be another long day." As the weeks passed and September arrived with slightly cooler temperatures, Josephine found herself watching for James, not just at mealtimes but throughout the day when she caught glimpses of the Cowboys working. She noticed how he gentled the horses, talking to them in a low voice before mounting. She saw how he helped the younger Cowboys without condescension, teaching them tricks for roping or handling stubborn cattle. She heard from Mabel that the ranch owner, Mr. Patterson, considered James one of his most reliable men, someone who might make foreman one day if he wanted it. She also noticed that James seemed to be finding more reasons to be near the chuck wagon. He would volunteer to haul water, to help move supplies, to check on the horses that were corralled nearby. And somehow these tasks always brought him into Josephine's orbit. One afternoon, when the heat was oppressive and most of the men were out on the range, James appeared with a jar of cool water from the spring. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing it to Josephine. She accepted it gratefully, drinking deeply. "How did you know?" "You have been working over that hot fire all morning, saw you looking faint." "I am fine," she protested automatically, but she was touched by his observation. Most people did not notice such things. "I know you are," James said, "but fine is not the same as comfortable." They stood together in the shade of the wagon, and Josephine found herself asking, "Do you ever think about doing something else?" Besides cowboy work, James considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I have been saving money. Thought maybe one day I could buy some land, start a small ranch of my own. Nothing fancy, just enough to make a decent living, have a home that is actually mine." He glanced at her. "What about you? What do you want?" No one had asked her that in years. Everyone had always told her what she should want, what was proper for a woman, what was realistic given her circumstances. "I want to not be afraid," she said finally. "I want to wake up in the morning and not immediately worry about money or food or where I will be next month. I want stability." "Safety." She paused, feeling brave. "Maybe a family someday if the right person came along." "That does not sound like too much to ask for," James said quietly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loneliness and shared hope. Josephine felt her heart beat faster. This man, this quiet cowboy with his simple kindness, had worked his way into her thoughts and under her defenses without her quite realizing it. "James," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Why have you never married?" He smiled slightly. "Never met anyone who made me want to settle down. Always figured I would know when the right woman came along." His gaze held hers. "Josephine, Brennan." A shout interrupted them. One of the ranch hands was riding in fast, looking agitated. "Boss needs you." "Got a situation with some rustlers spotted near the north pasture." James straightened immediately, his expression shifting to alert focus. "I will be right there." He looked back at Josephine. "We will talk later, be careful," she said, and was surprised by the intensity of her concern. "Always am." He touched the brim of his hat and strode toward his horse. Josephine watched him ride away with a clutch of other cowboys, feeling anxious. Cattle rustling could turn violent. Men died over stolen livestock. The afternoon dragged as she worked, her mind only half on her tasks. Mabel noticed but said nothing, just patted her shoulder knowingly. It was nearly dark when the cowboys returned. Josephine was serving dinner when James finally appeared, dusty and tired but unharmed. Relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly dropped the ladle. He caught her eye and nodded slightly, a reassurance that he was all right. She served his plate with shaking hands, giving him extra, and he accepted it with a small, private smile meant only for her. After the meal, after the cleaning was done and most everyone had settled for the night, James found her sitting on the wagon steps, looking up at the stars. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Please," she said, moving over to make room. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the night air finally cool after the day's heat. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly and a night bird called. "You were worried," James said. "Yes," Josephine admitted. I came back safe, this time." "But there will be other times, will there not? Other dangers." James turned to look at her, his face serious in the moonlight. "Josephine, I need to tell you something. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing how strong you are, how hard you work, how you keep going even when things are difficult, it has meant something to me." "You mean something to me," her breath caught. "James, I know I do not have much to offer," he continued. "I am just a cowboy with some savings and a lot of hope, but I am a hard worker and I am honest, and I would never let you go hungry or be afraid if I could help it. I would spend every day trying to make you happy." He took her hand carefully, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Josephine Fletcher. Have been since the first time I saw you working so hard and eating so little and refusing to complain." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I tried not to because it seemed foolish to hope for something good after so much loss, but you made it impossible not to care. You and your kindness and your quiet strength." James reached up to gently wipe her tears with his thumb. "Then maybe we could stop being afraid together. Maybe we could build something stable and safe, the two of us." "Yes," Josephine breathed. "Yes, I would like that very much." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not want to. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the promise of a future that was not just about survival but about actually living. Their lips met softly, tentatively, and then with growing certainty. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "We should do this properly," James said. "I should court you the right way, take you to church socials, let people see we are serious." "I would like that," Josephine said, "though I think Mabel already knows." As if summoned by her name, Mabel's voice drifted from inside the wagon. "About time you two figured it out. Some of us have been waiting weeks." They both laughed, and James squeezed Josephine's hand. "Guess we were not as subtle as we thought." The courtship that followed was conducted in the spaces between work, in stolen moments and meaningful glances. James took her to the church in Abilene on Sundays, sitting beside her in the pew with his hat in his lap. They walked together through town, James proudly introducing her to shopkeepers and ranchers he knew. He bought her small gifts when he could afford them: a hair ribbon, a pair of gloves for winter, a book of poetry she admired in the mercantile window. Josephine bloomed under the attention and the security of knowing she was cared for. Her face filled out as she ate properly, color returning to her cheeks. She smiled more easily, laughed at James's dry humor, and allowed herself to imagine a future that included happiness. Mabel watched them both with satisfaction, pleased to have played a small part in bringing them together. In October, as the cattle season wound down and the Triple Bar crew prepared to return to their home ranch for the winter, James asked to speak with Josephine privately. They walked to a small rise overlooking the town, the prairie grass golden in the late afternoon sun. "The crew is heading back to the main ranch in 2 days," James said. "It is about 40 miles south of here, good country for cattle. Mr. Patterson wants me to stay on through the winter, help with maintenance and tending the herd." "Oh," Josephine said, her heart sinking. She had been dreading this conversation, knowing their time together was coming to an end. "I suppose Mabel and Cookie will not need me once the season is over." "That is what I wanted to talk to you about." James took both her hands in his. "Come with us." "Not as a cook, I mean if you want to keep working you can, but that is not what I am asking. I am asking you to come as my wife." Josephine's eyes widened. "Your wife?" "I know it is fast," James said quickly. "I know we have only known each other a couple of months. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Josephine. I want to marry you, build a life with you. I have been talking to Mr. Patterson, and he said there is a small cabin on the ranch property that we could have. It needs some work, but it is sound. And I have been saving money, not a fortune, but enough to get us started to buy supplies and furniture. In a few years, if things go well, maybe we could buy our own land like I talked about, start our own place." He searched her face anxiously. "What do you say? Will you marry me?" Josephine felt joy surge through her, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, James, I will marry you. I love you so much." He swept her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring all his happiness and relief into it. "We will have a good life," he promised against her lips. "I swear to you I will work every day to make you happy." "You already make me happy," Josephine said, "just by being you." They were married a week later in the small church in Abilene, with Mabel and Cookie standing as witnesses and a handful of cowboys filling the pews. Josephine wore a simple blue dress that Mabel had helped her make over from some fabric they found in town. James wore his best shirt and vest, his hair neatly trimmed, looking nervous and proud. The preacher kept the ceremony short and practical, which suited them both fine. When James slid a simple gold band onto Josephine's finger, he had used a good portion of his savings to buy it. She felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was real. She was married. She had a husband who loved her, a future that was not defined by fear and hunger. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said, and James did, sweetly and thoroughly, while the cowboys hooted and clapped. The journey to the Triple Bar Ranch took 2 days with the cattle and wagons. Josephine rode beside James in a supply wagon, bouncing over rutted roads and watching the landscape change from flat prairie to rolling hills with scattered trees. James pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about the ranch and the people who worked there. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Josephine found herself getting excited despite her natural caution. The ranch itself was more substantial than she had expected. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure with a wide porch, surrounded by barns, corrals, a bunkhouse, and several smaller outbuildings. Mr. Patterson, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a direct manner, greeted them when they arrived. "So you are the one who finally got Brennan to settle down," he said to Josephine, shaking her hand firmly. "Welcome to the Triple Bar. You need anything, you let me or my wife know. We take care of our people here." "Thank you, sir," Josephine said, liking him immediately. The cabin James had mentioned was about a 1/4 mile from the main compound, set near a stand of cottonwood trees with a small creek running behind it. It was indeed small, just 2 rooms, a main living area with a fireplace and a separate bedroom, but it had glass windows, a solid roof, and a sturdy door. To Josephine, who had spent the past month sleeping in a crowded wagon, it looked like paradise. "I know it is not much," James said, watching her face anxiously, "but we can fix it up, make it nice." "It is perfect," Josephine said honestly. "It is ours, James, that makes it perfect." They spent the next weeks making the cabin into a home. James repaired the chinking between the logs, fixed loose floorboards, and built furniture, a proper table, chairs, a bed frame, shelves for storage. Josephine sewed curtains from fabric misses. Patterson generously provided from her stores, scrubbed the place from top to bottom, and arranged their few possessions with care. The ranch women welcomed her cautiously at first, then warmly when they saw she was willing to work and did not put on airs. She helped in the main house kitchen when needed, traded sewing skills for supplies, and slowly built a community. Winter came hard and cold, with snow that piled high and winds that howled through the gaps in the cabin walls. But inside, wrapped in quilts beside the fire with James's arms around her, Josephine had never felt warmer. They talked for hours during those long winter nights, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for their future, simple observations about their days. They learned each other's habits and preferences, the way married couples do, how James liked his coffee strong and black, how Josephine always read before bed, how they both woke early from years of hard work. They also learned each other in more intimate ways, with tenderness and patience and growing confidence. Josephine had been nervous on their wedding night, her knowledge of marital relations being mostly theoretical and vague. But James was gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cared for. "We have all the time in the world," he whispered when she apologized for her inexperience. "There is no rush, we will figure it out together." And they did, discovering pleasure and connection that deepened their bond. By spring, Josephine suspected she was pregnant. Her courses had stopped and she felt nauseated in the mornings, though she tried to hide it from James at first. But he noticed, because of course he did. He always noticed. "Josephine, you have barely touched your breakfast for 3 days," he said one morning. "And you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" She set down her fork and met his eyes. "I think I might be with child." James went very still, then a slow smile spread across his face, bright and wondering. Truly, I think so. It is early yet, but the signs are there. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. A baby, he murmured. Our baby, Josephine, that is wonderful. You are not worried, she asked. About the expense or the responsibility, or, of course I am worried, James said honestly. I am terrified, but I am also happier than I have been since the day you married me. We will manage, we always do. And they did manage. As Josephine's belly grew through the summer months, James took on extra work to save money for the baby. He built a cradle from cottonwood, sanding it smooth and carving simple designs into the headboard. Mrs. Patterson and the ranch women threw a small gathering for Josephine, bringing baby clothes and blankets and advice. Josephine felt surrounded by goodwill and support in a way she had never experienced before, and she was grateful. The baby came in late September, almost exactly a year after James had first proposed. Labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. James paced outside the cabin while Mrs. Patterson and one of the other ranch women attended Josephine, offering what help and comfort they could. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with strong lungs and a full head of dark hair, James was allowed inside to meet his son. He is perfect, James said hoarsely, looking down at the tiny face with an expression of absolute awe. You are perfect. Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for this gift. Josephine, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at him. What should we name him? They had discussed names, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, James said, What about William, after my grandfather? He was a good man, one of the few decent people in my family. William Brennan, Josephine said, testing the name. I like it. William, or Will for short. Will was a good baby, healthy and alert. Josephine devoted herself to caring for him while James continued working on the ranch. They settled into new rhythms as a family, learning how to balance work and parenthood, exhaustion and joy. James would come home after long days and take Will from Josephine so she could rest, walking the floor with the baby and singing to him in a low, off-key voice that always made Josephine smile. The years that followed were not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle lost to disease and money that was tight more often than not. But through it all, James and Josephine held fast to each other and to the life they were building. James was promoted to foreman after 5 years with the Triple Bar, which came with better pay and more responsibility. They saved diligently, every spare dollar going into a jar hidden under a floorboard. When Will was 4, Josephine gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Emma, who arrived early one spring morning and immediately turned the household upside down with their demands and their identical faces. James was utterly overwhelmed by suddenly having 3 children, but he rose to the challenge with his typical quiet competence. Josephine, more experienced now, handled the chaos with greater ease, though there were still nights when they both collapsed into bed wondering how they would manage another day. We need more space, James said one evening when the twins were 6 months old. The cabin had been fine for 2 people, manageable with 1 child but positively cramped with 5. I have been thinking. We have saved enough now for a down payment on land, not much, maybe 40 or 50 acres, but enough to start our own place. What do you think? Josephine looked around their crowded cabin, then at James. I think it is time. You have wanted your own ranch for so long. Let us do it. It took another year to find the right property and complete the purchase, but eventually they became the owners of 45 acres about 10 miles from the Triple Bar, with a decent water source, good grass for cattle, and enough timber to build a proper house. Mr. Patterson was sorry to lose James as foreman, but understood his desire to work for himself. He even sold them a small starter herd at a fair price and promised to buy beef from them when they were ready to sell. Building the new ranch was a massive undertaking. They lived in a temporary dugout while James and several hired helpers constructed a house. Nothing fancy, but solid and spacious, with 4 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a parlor. They built a barn, corrals, a chicken coop, and a smokehouse. Josephine worked alongside James as much as she could while also managing the children, planting a kitchen garden, and starting to build a home in this new place. There were setbacks and frustrations. A late frost killed half the garden. One of their cows died giving birth. The roof leaked during a heavy rain, but there were also triumphs. Their first cattle sale brought in enough money to buy more stock. Will, now 7, started helping with chores and proved to have a natural way with animals. The twins were healthy and rambunctious, filling the house with noise and laughter. One evening, after a long day of work, James and Josephine sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The children were finally asleep inside, and the ranch was quiet except for the usual sounds of cattle and horses settling for the night. "Do you remember the day we met?" James asked, reaching over to take Josephine's hand. "Of course," Josephine said. "I was desperate and hungry and trying very hard not to show it. I remember thinking you were the proudest, most stubborn woman I had ever seen," James said with a smile, "standing there like a queen even though you were clearly at the end of your rope. And I remember thinking you were the quietest, most observant man I had ever met. You saw things other people missed." "I saw you," James said simply, "and I knew you were someone special, someone worth knowing." Josephine leaned against his shoulder. "Thank you for serving my plate before your own, for noticing I was hungry and doing something about it. That kindness changed my life." "You would have survived without me," James said. "You are strong enough." "Maybe," Josephine conceded, "but I would not have been happy." "You gave me more than food, James. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to believe in good things again. You gave me love." James kissed the top of her head. "And you gave me the same. A reason to stop just surviving and start actually living, a family of my own, a place to belong. Everything I have, everything I am now, is because you said yes to a cowboy with more dreams than sense." "Best decision I ever made," Josephine said softly. They sat together as darkness fell, comfortable in their silence, bound by years of shared work and mutual devotion. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, their ranch, built with their own hands and sustained by their own labor, represented everything they had fought for. It was not an easy life, but it was theirs, and it was good. Over the next decade, the Brennan Ranch prospered modestly. They never became wealthy, but they made a decent living and were respected in their community. James gained a reputation as an honest dealer and a skilled cattleman. Josephine became known for her generosity, always willing to help a neighbor in need, remembering what it was like to be desperate and alone. They added 2 more children to their family, another boy named Thomas and a daughter named Margaret, and the house rang with chaos and joy. Will grew into a fine young man, tall and quiet like his father, with the same gift for noticing what others needed. When he was 19, he married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and James helped him start his own small place nearby. The twins, inseparable as always, became skilled riders and could handle cattle as well as any cowboy. They were fierce and independent, much to their mother's pride and occasional exasperation. Thomas showed a surprising talent for numbers and business, helping his father negotiate better prices for their cattle and keep accurate records. Young Margaret, the baby of the family, was curious about everything and drove her siblings crazy with her endless questions. She loved to follow her father around, and James, who had never imagined himself as a man with a large family, found that he loved every minute of the noise and chaos his children brought. Through it all, James never forgot the lesson that had brought him and Josephine together. Whenever someone came to their ranch looking for work or help, hungry or desperate, James always made sure they were fed first, questions asked later. He and Josephine became known as people you could turn to when times were hard, and they helped as many as they could. It was their way of paying forward the kindness and the chances they had been given, One summer evening when James was 48 and Josephine was 45, they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren, Will's two daughters, play in the yard. Their hair was gray now, their faces lined from years of sun and wind and hard work. But their hands were still intertwined, their affection still evident in every glance and gesture. "Remember when you asked me what I wanted," Josephine said suddenly. "That first time we really talked. I remember you said you wanted to not be afraid, wanted stability and safety." "I got all that," Josephine said, "and so much more than I even knew to want. A husband who loves me, children and grandchildren, a home that is truly ours, a whole lifetime of memories." She turned to look at him, her eyes bright. "What about you? Did you get what you wanted?" James looked out at the ranch they had built, the family they had raised, the life they had created together. "I got everything I wanted and things I did not even know I was hoping for. I wanted land and independence, but what I really needed was you, a partner. Someone to share it all with. You made all of it meaningful. We made a good life," Josephine said with satisfaction. "The best life," James agreed. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every hardship, every challenge, all of it. Because it led me to you and to this." As the sun set over their ranch, painting everything in shades of gold, James and Josephine Brennan sat together in the peace of a life well lived. They had started with nothing but hunger and hope, and they had built something lasting. Their children were grown and thriving, their grandchildren were healthy, and their love had only deepened with time. The quiet cowboy who had noticed a hungry woman and chose to do something about it, and the proud woman who had let herself accept help and love. They had found in each other exactly what they needed. And every day, in small ways and large, they continued to choose each other, continued to serve each other before themselves, continued to build the life they had dreamed of back when they were young and hungry and hoping for something better. It was a simple story in many ways, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful, and it was complete. Their legacy lived on not just in their children and grandchildren, but in the example they set for anyone who knew them. That kindness matters, that noticing others' needs is important, that love built on mutual respect and care can weather any storm. The Brennan Ranch stood as testament to what two people could build when they worked together, when they put each other first, when they refused to give up even when things were hard. And at the heart of it all was a simple act of compassion from a young cowboy who saw a woman going hungry and decided to serve her plate before his own, changing both their lives forever. In their final years, James and Josephine never left the ranch they had built. They spent their days surrounded by family, watching their grandchildren grow and eventually welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. They told stories of the old days, of cattle drives and harsh winters, of building something from nothing, of falling in love over shared meals and quiet conversations. And when James passed peacefully in his sleep at 71, with Josephine holding his hand, the whole community came to mourn a good man who had lived with integrity and kindness. Josephine followed him 3 years later, and they were buried on a hillside overlooking the ranch, their graves side by side beneath a cottonwood tree. Their children kept the ranch going, honoring their parents' memory by continuing to work hard, help their neighbors, and love each other well. The story of how James and Josephine met, of how a cowboy's simple act of kindness sparked a lifetime of love, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder that small acts of compassion can change everything, and that the best love stories are built not on grand gestures but on daily choices to care for each other, to notice what is needed, to serve others before ourselves.